want to type in chat or something like that if somebody can just confirm that they can hear me. Thank you. Thank you very much for confirming. All right, if at any time it's hard to hear one of us, let us know. We're using one of our desk phones. Unfortunately, I couldn't grab one of the conference phones, so just let us know if you have any trouble at any point. I'm going to start sharing my screen and we can get going. After we correct that, I'm showing the wrong screen. There we go. You should be seeing the correct screen now. It looks like PowerPoint decided to pick what screen it wanted to play on. So we are going to be covering today ICBM dialer real-time statistics and historical reports. My name is Derek Hale. I'm the principal engineer for the dialer team. I've been on the team for about 2.5 years. And with me is Eric Berkshire, who is our senior systems engineer, also for the dialer team. A little over 1.5 years on the team. What we're going to be covering today is based on ICBM 4.0 SU6 and dialer 4.0 SU3. We went with this, although many of you listening may be on earlier SUs of IC or of dialer, because I wanted to be able to go over as the product stands right now, because there are quite a few views we'll be showing that have been added in newer IC SUs, and some of the views are actually new to SU3. So if something you see doesn't appear in your system when you look in ICBM, chances are good it is just because you are not at the SU level. We're pretty well aware of a few of these views and what's new to SU3 or what's new to SU6, but unfortunately I don't have a complete list of a breakdown of each one. So if you have any questions on those, you can always contact support or ask us at the end, and I'll see if there's any of those I can just look up for you real quick, because we do add reports pretty much every ICSU, and some of these ICBM views are new to each dialer SU. This is broken up into 3 primary sections: dialer historical views basics, dialer real-time views basics, and then the dialer real-time views scenarios. You'll find that we move pretty quickly through the historical and the real-time view basics because we revisit a few of the views when we do the scenarios, and I kind of like the scenarios a little better because I want to actually give you some tips on how this might apply to your own environment, where the other stuff, the historical view basics and real-time view basics, you can get a lot of that from our help documentation, so it doesn't make as much sense to spend a lot of time on the webinar for that when we could spend more time in the scenarios. Eric Berkshire is going to start us off with the dialer historical view basics, and we'll get going with that.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, so what you're seeing here is a list of the current dialer reports at the IC0 SU6. Dialer reports, as many of you know, are now released as part of the IC SU upgrades. So if you're missing some of these, you'd want to check your IC SU version. You can find in the release notes which ones for each SU, which reports are included. First one we're going to talk about is the agent success results. As you can see, its report shows individual agent performance per campaign as it relates to right party contacts and success dispositions. So you can see here we have one agent. You know, they've taken dialer calls, or 12 dialer calls. Got the difference from the average there, so you can look, you know, how successful that agent is compared to the other agents. Right party contacts as you know, defined on your wrap-up code or categories. It's basically the same kind of stats between dialer calls, right party contacts, and successes, and your total results, and looking at that. So that's pretty good for, you know, evaluating, you know, how your agents are doing from a success standpoint. The next one's your call history. This is pretty similar to what we had in 3.0. You know, we break these out by campaign, the campaign call was made for, the phone number, the call date, call time, what time they actually answered, if we played a message, what agent it went to, what time it disconnected, stuff like that. Yeah, we include abandons versus contacts there. If it's a contact, we mark it as a C. If it's abandoned, it's going to be A. And then you got your disposition, so you can easily go back through and say, hey, what was the result of this call, and get that information.
Eric, one moment, please. Nicole mentioned that she switched the headphones to only hear music. I'm guessing that doesn't go for everybody. So I'm just going to respond to her real quick, so bear with us 1 second. Oh, never mind. She is good. She got dialed back in. I apologize. Go ahead, Eric.
So yeah, that's just an easy way to look through in ICBM, your past call history. Here's we got our campaign disposition summary. Splits the dispositions between agent, system, along with total dispositions. It gives you a quick outlook on what we're seeing from a result standpoint. Whether it be by the you can break it down by agents themselves, or dialer dispositions, or all the dispositions. So agents did 2 busy, 11 no answers. You're seeing a lot of no answers in your campaign. You're wondering why. Well, in this scenario, the agents are actually disposing of these as no answer calls. So it gives you a quick overview. You can see the call length, the average for a particular disposition, and the percent total for that disposition. Campaign statistics report. It gives you the specifics for your for a particular campaign, broken out by period type. So this is half hour. You can see, from 16 at 4 o'clock, our filter size was 13, our recycle size was 4. We had, 0.1 agents available for this campaign. It goes on, gives you like a brief moment in time what was going on with the campaign. And in the bottom panel, you're going to see all your events for that. And so, at the start, recycle and reset, what our stats were for those events. It's broken out in the bottom panel, so you can scroll through and say, at 4:25 when we stopped the campaign, we had 18 in our filter size, but 0 in our recycle table. So it gives you just a moment in time of what was going on. Next report is campaign success results. Similar to the agent success, but it's an overview of the campaign rather than specific agents. So once again, it's broken out by a specific time. So, at 4 o'clock again, we're looking at 1 agent. He'd made 1 call. It wasn't a contact. So it wasn't a success, obviously. But it gives you that, you drill down and really see what's going on from a campaign overview rather than that agent. This is a pretty neat one, call analysis. So this is it's broken out by time. And it's going to give you, your call analysis results, how many you get, what percentage of the total calls placed for that time period resulted in what call analysis. So say, you're noticing for a particular campaign that you seem to get a lot more live voices at between 11 and noon. Well, then you start thinking about agent staffing levels and things like that. You're going to want to maybe move more agents into that particular campaign because live people are, the end result. So we want to get through this contact list a little bit quicker during these hours because we seem to be having higher success rate with that. It's also be used, if you start to see like a bunch of set uncallables at a certain time period, you could, investigate that. So, it's pretty interesting. Breaks everything down. I really like that report. Agent utilization. This is gonna compare your agents and show you where they're spending most of their time. Whether it be maybe they're sitting on a preview call for an extended period of time, and you can go talk to them and say what's going on. Inbound calls, annual dial calls. Just gives you how they're spending their time. Comparative to their total logged in time. So, it includes a percentage. So you can see, if he was in, like the first user was only in the campaign for a minute, but, for 8 seconds, which figured out to be 11% of that time he was actually talking to someone. So it's pretty neat to be able to go in there and take a look at, how our agents are spending their time. That we're, being efficient with these agents, the campaign. Agent disposition summary. This view provides an historical look into what dispositions agents use often per campaign. It provides insight into unusual behavior, so you can see, like skipped. If an agent's going through and skipping a lot of records, it's going to be shown here that, hey, this agent skips 20 records while, the other agents are only skipping maybe 2 or 3. What's going on there? So, you can use this report a variety of ways to get like an outlook on, what's going on with the agents and how they're handling these interactions. Agent utilization by campaign. It's similar to agent utilization, but it's broken out by a campaign. So you can see on the specific campaign, you want to select maybe your preview to see those skipped ones. It allows for that, so you can get, oh, okay, on this specific campaign, he's skipping 30 records. Well, maybe there's a reason for that. Skills-based dialing, and that particular agent just happens to get all these records. So really, once you drill down, it makes sense. So real-time views, Derek will be taking over.
And before I get into these, I wanted to also note, I see a lot of you asking questions. We're not at all ignoring you. I should have said this earlier. I always end up doing this. We will get all the questions at the end, so please do not be afraid to ask them. I will do my best to get to them. The only one that I will address right now was by James Bird. We will have this available after all of our webinars get posted to the my.inin.com site. I think if you go, I think it's under the product information page, you should see a section for webinars. It may not be immediately when we're done here because we have to do some editing and cleanup and make sure if there are any questions that we can't answer directly at the end of this webinar, that we have time to get those answered so that we can post them along with the webinar. So yes, it will be posted. It is unlikely to be today, or it may not even be before the end of this week, depending on the schedule of Eric and I for the rest of this week, but we will get it, should be within the next week or so. So yeah, continuing on. Real-time views in ICBM. Again, this is a section where we are going to get through it fairly quickly because I go over pretty much all these again in our scenario section in more detail. The ones that I might spend more time on are ones that we don't necessarily revisit. Campaign overview. This isn't exactly how it would look, but in order for you to be able to see everything and be able to fairly well read it, I had to kind of just cut out parts of campaign overview and just put them on the slide. So forgive the format. It was a constant battle between readability and making it look nice. So in here on dialer overview, you'll be able to see multiple campaigns at the same time, our abandon rate per campaign, calls per hour, connected calls, etc., along with a graph that will show you the disposition category depending on which campaign you have selected at that time. One part that I wanted to point out here, because I don't have this exact image later in the scenario where I would also kind of discuss it, is in the lower right-hand corner you see agent, dialer admin, the stage is idle, but the status is campaign call. This can be very confusing because you're like, well, if they're idle, because a lot of you that have been using dialer for a long time are probably pretty aware that dialer places calls for an agent if they're in an available status in an idle state. Uh, it's something that we've kind of discussed with our development team because I feel it's a little confusing that the stage shows it's idle, and somebody may confuse that for the state. In fact, that is not the state. When you see an agent in a stage of idle but a status of campaign call, that means that they are on a campaign call in another campaign they are logged into, but not the campaign you have selected. So in this case, I have the dialer reporting campaign selected, but my agent is logged into both dialer reporting and power campaign. So the agent is on a campaign call, and you can see the preceding calls in that screenshot for power campaign. So if I were to click over to the power campaign, it would show instead for that agent, dialer admin was in a stage, it'd be something like auto added stage 0, auto added stage 1, and the status would also be campaign call. So don't let that be confusing in that you think your agents are sitting idle and aren't placing calls or aren't on a call, like they're just sitting there not doing any work. If you see that status of campaign call, then they are on a call. It's just on a different campaign than what you have selected. So I find that can be a little confusing, so I wanted to make sure we cover that clearly. Campaign details. This is probably one of my favorite live views because both for seeing how dialer is performing as well as diagnosing dialer issues, this is just about the best view for a number of reasons, and I'll get into them more in scenario section, but it gives you a lot of very specific stats about the way dialer is performing. And it also gives you agent-specific information as to what the average agent idle time is for that campaign on a period, shift, recycle, and campaign basis. As you can see in this example, my average agent idle time at its highest point for the shift was 10 seconds. And it also gives you the current contact rate. So I have a 20% contact rate, which is fairly decent for a power predictive campaign. This is a continuation of campaign details. I know it just seems like a chart in the middle of nowhere, but it's essentially the same chart as what you saw earlier in the dialer overview. It shows you the disposition categories that are most common based on total calls in the campaign details view. Dialer health view. This is another outstanding view that is, I find, not often utilized, but I really feel like a lot of our customers should look at this almost as much as they would campaign details. It can give you your first notification of problems that you may be seeing with dialer. It's essentially like the event log for Windows, but it's for our system, for dialer. It has a status and a history section. Status is more about what's happening right now. A campaign is recycling. A campaign has been turned on. A campaign is under dialing restrictions. Where history will show you historical information that you may find relevant. So you can see that a campaign recycled 20 times in an hour. Well, that's not what we would expect. We need to look into that kind of thing. And again, dialer health view we covered pretty well back in scenarios, so I know some of you may want to know more. I promise you we'll tell you more. Real quick, these are generally not very information-filled views, the agent overview, time zone overview, and skill overview, because they have very specific tasks. So agent overview will show you all the agents in a specific campaign, how long they've been in a certain status or stage, what station they're logged in as, and what stage they're on. I mean, this is good for looking to make sure that you don't have agents that have been sitting in an available status for an extended period of time, but it's probably not something that, unless you think there's an issue, you would look at too often. Time zone overview. This is a new view for dialer SU3. Any of you that have come from dialer 3.0, you should be probably familiar of this. This existed in 3.0, and much to my dismay, it did not make it into the initial release of 4.0, but thankfully as of SU3, it is back. And this is really useful because, and again, if some of you have come from 3.0 or run into this in 4.0, and you use time zones, you may have hit an instance where you turn on a campaign at 7:58 a.m. and you're in Eastern time zone. Your agents are logged in, but they've been sitting there idle for a couple minutes, and you're wondering why. Maybe you call into support, it's a code red, we look into it, and it's because at 7:58, all of your zones are blocked because they don't unblock till 8 a.m. You just were a little ahead of time that day. And by the time you've gotten through to us, maybe, 8 a.m. is clicked over and all of a sudden it starts dialing. Well, the time zone overview can tell you if your zones are being blocked. And in our little example here, we're only showing a couple zones, but you'll have as many zones as you have configured in your zone set, and your status of true or false will determine if that zone is callable. And we also display the number of callable contacts. So another issue we sometimes run into is EDT may be true, meaning it's unblocked, but there's 0 callable contacts, but there's 4,000 callable contacts for CST, which doesn't get unblocked for another 20 minutes. And then somebody might call in a code red on that saying, well, when I do a run test, it says I have 4,000 callable records, but it's not dialing. Well, look at your later zones and make sure they don't all fall under that. And to reiterate, this is available right now as of dialer SU3. If you are on dialer GA, dialer SU1, or dialer SU2, you will almost certainly not see this view. But as soon as you go to dialer SU3, this should be available to you. Skill overview, also new to dialer SU3, which again is available now. This lets you view the skills that are configured for a specific campaign, how many scheduled contacts we have for that particular skill, how many outstanding contacts we have for that skill, and how many agents we have available for that skill. This is also important because you may run into an issue where you've got 3 agents that are sitting there idle. And let's say that of those 2 skills we're showing on the screenshot, they have the Indiana skill, but Indiana has 0 outstanding contacts while Ohio has 4,000 contacts still to go. We won't do a recycle until we get done with those 4,000 contacts in Ohio, because we don't need to start over all over again immediately. So it may be an instance where you need to find another campaign for those agents in the meantime until they finish with Ohio. Really quick one, stage overview. Pretty sure this is also SU3 new. But this shows you, if you set up stages in your script, you'll be able to see what stage, or on a per stage basis, how many calls make it to that stage, how much time agents are spending on those stages, how many agents disposition calls on those stages, and how many completed calls on those stages, instead of a percentage, an actual figure. I wanted to outline on this. You may notice that it says NA for stage 1. Well, in the script that I ran these tests on, stage 1 is basically like stage 0 was an introduction, and then stage 1 is where we explain the what we offer to sell in my fictional company that I made these calls from. So there were no disposition options in stage 1. So you'll see NA for the completed calls, the percent completed. And stage 2 is where I've made the sale. And so I dispositioned the calls there, and that's why there's 2 completed calls. The reason you see a completed call on stage 0 is because I had a no answer disposition on there, so it was a way just to get out of that stage immediately. So I can disposition some calls there. Wrap-up category chart view. This is similar to the chart you'll see on dialer overview or dialer campaign details, just much larger. Instead of it being in the lower left portion of the view, you've just got a blown up view to make it a little easier to read. This wrap-up code chart is actually unique. So this you won't find in the dialer campaign details or campaign overview, because instead of just giving the category, this lets you see the actual codes associated with the category. So as you see at the top, I've selected the machine wrap-up category, and I've had 2 different codes associated with the machine wrap-up category. Penetration rate view. This is a new view, one that I'm sure will be pretty popular with a lot of our customers that have been asking for penetration reporting for a while. It gives you a basic rundown of the how far we went as far as penetration rate into a call list, and you can split it up by the upload date. So let's say that you upload contacts every morning at 6 a.m. or whatever. We will assign an upload date time to that in the SQL database. So you can see Now let's say I only have one in here, and I apologize. I wish I had a more detailed example of this. But let's say for 5 days I uploaded new contact at 6 a.m. each day. You'd see each individual day it was 6 a.m. for the upload date, and then I could select one or more of those and then run the penetration report, and I could see, okay, so on Monday I got through 94% of my records, so I dialed 17 of my 18 records. But on Tuesday I only got through 80%, what happened on Tuesday. And it's a good way for you to see how quickly you're making it through new contacts that you add, and making sure that those new contacts aren't being missed. Because I know that one of the biggest issues that you may have, and what I hear from a lot of our dialer customers, is that they may purchase contact lists from a third party, especially if you're doing sales or anything like that, and you need to make sure you're getting to those contacts as quickly as possible and to beat your competition. And knowing your penetration rate is the best way to make sure you stay on top of that, because you can see how quickly you're getting through those new contacts and make sure you're not just spinning your wheels on old contacts. All right, making our way into the scenarios. This is one that we'll kind of address with just Eric and I both having some input into this. This is something that I wanted to be able to spend a little more time on because I think it's important, and then we'll get to your questions. Dialer performance, I'll start off with this real quick. Dialer performance gives you some very important details into how dialer is performing on a specific campaign. And certain aspects of dialer that impact performance that I find come up most often are the recycle blocks, your filter size, and your effective idle agents. So I've taken an overall view of the dialer campaign details that you see above, and I've taken out 6 very important stats that if you aren't watching regularly, I suggest that you do so. First one we'll start with is idle agents. As you see, I have one idle agent, and then I have one effective idle agent. If you're not sure how those differ, because I'm only logged into a single campaign with this agent, my effective idle agents is also going to be 1 when my idle agent is 1. If I were logged into 2 campaigns, I might show 1 idle agent in each campaign, but my effective idle agent per campaign would be 0.5. So it's not necessarily going to be 0.5. There's certain other factors that go into effective idle agents, including campaign priority. What else am I missing? Campaign priority. I want to say skills. I think there was something else. I know that we have a knowledge base article that covers that. If you look up campaign priority in our knowledge base article, it tells you what all goes into that. But the effective idle agents, I'm just going to try to keep it on a very simple level. If your agents were in 2 different campaigns with equal campaign priority and equal pretty much everything else, your effective idle agents might essentially be 0.5 for 1 idle agent in each campaign. So if you have one campaign that hasn't dialed in a while, but you're like, I've got 5 idle agents, look at what the effective idle agent is for that campaign. If it's something like 0.3, but your other campaigns are at 1.6 apiece, then that may explain why those other campaigns are dialing, and you may need to look at, again, your campaign priority. Are we prioritizing other campaigns over this campaign, so on. So that could definitely impact our performance, because if you inadvertently configure a campaign at a lower priority, but it's a very important campaign, then you need to make sure that effective idle agents isn't starving that campaign. Recycle size, in this view it has 0. Hopefully you'd never see that. If you have a filter size of, in this example, 17 and a recycle size of 0, then something is most likely keeping those records from being pulled into the recycle table and then eventually pulled into cache. And the example here is because all of the records are in the recycle blocks. Recycle blocked in effectively every instance means that they're being time zone blocked. So then you'd use that new time zone overview to review which zone is blocking them. So if you have recycle size of 0, recycle blocked is effectively your filter size. Look at the time zones and see if maybe there's something blocking it. This is another clue that you might have a zone problem.
The other thing that can cause that with minimum minutes to next dial. Really high number there, so like a couple days. I've seen people do that in the past where those records actually don't get brought into the recycle until the minimum minutes has expired. So you can see your recycle size, diminish or not be as high as you would expect because of high setting there.
Yeah, and I don't believe that those would appear in recycle blocked either. I think that they just don't show up. So if you have a high filter size, or if you have this is really important if you have a small contact list, like let's say you have 150 records and it's a preview campaign, but you have your minimum minutes to next dial set to 3 hours. Well, if you have 10 agents dialing 150 records, even in a preview campaign, you'll most likely get through that in under 3 hours. Dialer will recycle, it'll keep recycling, and you're wondering what's going on. It's most likely that minimum minutes to next dial is impacting. And unfortunately, I'm not aware of any view or anything that you could see that. You really just kind of have to look in your campaign configuration, see what your minimum minutes is set to, and then look in SQL or run a query in Interaction Administrator to see what your last called UTC was. And that's a column in your call list, should be last called UTC. See what the most or the oldest time is there, and kind of use that to determine if you're over 3 hours out yet or not. Filter size is another one that, this isn't as much of an impact on performance per se, except that it could prevent you from getting through all the records you want if your filter isn't properly configured and you have a much smaller filter size than you would expect. Cache contacts can play into performance, because if you find that your cache contacts is constantly dropping down to 0, that most likely indicates that your SQL server is not performing quickly enough to get dialer records that it needs to keep itself busy. The dialer system checks for pulls new records into cache almost every 2 minutes, and it does that by pulling the records from the recycle table. If we're not getting responses back from SQL in time, and let's say even if it takes 10 seconds, we can easily burn through the few hundred or few thousand records we have cached, and then dialer has to slow down and wait until it gets records from SQL. So if your cache contact is frequently hitting 0, but your recycle size is high, I would look into possible SQL performance issues in getting us those queries back. And it may not even necessarily be that you have an underpowered server. We've seen very complex filters leading to higher SQL query times. And that's something that you can call into our team, into the support team, to have us help you take a look at that, see what our query performance times are. Or if you have a DBA, they should be able to do a performance check on how long average queries are taking with dialer. Did you have any more on performance? Agent performance. This, you're pretty much going to use the agent overview when looking at this. A few things I wanted to address was how long an agent was sitting in a status. If they're sitting in available for long periods of time, you'd want to determine why. If they're sitting in an awaiting callback status, that usually indicates that dialer is trying to place a precise dial for them. If you overutilize precise dials, you may find that agents are sitting in that status for a long period of time because dialer has to basically reserve them, place the call, find out what the disposition of the call is if we don't hit a customer, and then set them back and then dial on them again. Stage versus state versus status. I covered this a bit earlier. Again, make sure you understand that a status is going to be something like available, campaign call, or follow-up. Your state is going to be either idle or non-dialer call, and your stage is going to be the actual stage in the campaign, which is something like auto-added 0, auto-added 1, or your stage may be idle. Unfortunately, and I'm looking to see if we can get this added in as a feature later on, it doesn't display the state, and I want to see if we can at some point get the state added, because I think having state would be very useful. Alert condition. We believe it's a good idea to consider setting some alerts under certain conditions for your agents. High agent stage time So you see here it shows time and stage 3 minutes 47 seconds. Now, that may not be that unusual if you're selling insurance, for example. You've got to go over the ins and outs of the premiums, and they're on the same page explaining the premium for 5 or 10 minutes. That's not entirely unusual, but you would know your business better than anyone. And if whatever you're doing, on average, you find that agents only spend 2 minutes per page in your script. So every page in the script should ideally have a stage. If you find that they're only spending 2 minutes per page in the script, then you might want to set something that says, well, if their time and stage is over 5 minutes, I need to find out why. And that just helps make sure that your customers are getting good customer service, that the agent isn't stumbling on something that maybe they could use some help with, or in the very unlikely scenario that an agent is doing something where they're taking up time by taking advantage of, a really long answering machine message or something like that, and they're sitting there and they're playing on their phone while it's going on. It's a good way of just making sure that not only are your customers getting the best service possible, but that you're getting the most out of your agents. High average agent idle. This is usually not going to indicate something that your agents are doing, but you do want to maybe turn this on, and this would most likely be under your campaign details view where we show the average agent idle time. You'd probably want to set something on there so that you can see, well, this campaign, all of a sudden our idle time, which was 12 seconds, has gone up to 2 minutes. 2 minute idle time in dialer is what we would consider well above norm. Usually idle time in dialer, assuming your contact rate isn't really bad for some reason, should be well under a minute. Especially with predictive dialing, it should be pretty consistently below 30 seconds or at 30 seconds, unless again, your contact rate is really bad. There's not much dialer can do if a contact rate is just bad. So dialer issues and information. So this is where we go back into the real-time or the dialer health view. And I wanted to throw some examples so that you could get a clear understanding of why this view, we believe, is so important, and why if you were to call in a code red or even just some high priority issue you really wanted an answer on, it would probably be one of the first views we asked you to look at. Discuss anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, so as you can see, it's going to be, you're going to see like, say you call in a code red, you're saying, hey, we've noticed our agents have high idle time, what's going on? We pop in here and we see, a warning, like we do in this first warning in the upper left, that our abandonment rate has, dialing restrictions have been applied. So we can double click on that. We go in there and we say, oh, well, we're receiving a lot of abandons. At that point in time, we know, where to look exactly. We have this strict abandonment rate, and we've dropped, our pace down to -100, so we're placing one call per agent essentially. So, we go, oh, that's why we're seeing, these such high agent idle times, because at one call per agent, it doesn't take much for, depending on your contact rate, you could have agents sitting around for a little bit while we're waiting to get to an available party.
And what Eric said there, I want to make sure doesn't get missed, because it's something that when we're on these code red calls, we hear very often people surprise you can do, is you'll see the message that says dialing restrictions have been applied to the campaign dialer reporting. You're like, oh, okay, that's great. Why? Well, a lot of people don't know that you can double click it, and when you double click that dialing restrictions, that's where you get that little dialog box you see in the top left that says the current abandonment rate is, has gone higher than expected. So that's why the dialing restrictions are in place, because dialing restrictions, I believe, appear for other reasons too. I think when you're hitting your maximum lines, so this dialing restrictions is kind of like a general that you double click and you get the details of. So sorry.
Fine. Yeah. Yeah, you can double click them. Okay, so in our second example, you can see that the contact cache has been depleted on the server, and you're going, okay, what does that mean? So you double click and you see that, that the campaign, or the possible conditions, there's some suggestions in here, undersized database server hardware, things like that. I mean, basically, our cache is empty, and so we're throwing this message to say, hey, there could be a problem here. Go and take a look at it. And then the third example, you see that we're going to throw a warning if, say, our zone set is blocking, or we're out of numbers to call. You can see that it's saying that the configured standard zone specified is blocking all callable records. So that it tells you right there, going back to that earlier example of why it's 7:58 and our agents are logged in, they're sitting idle. If we look in dialer health, we're going to get that message say, hey, everything's blocked right now. So we can use that to help troubleshoot these issues and oh, okay, that makes sense. I guess that brings us to questions. Unless there's something there.
Yeah, the dialer history, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I missed that one.
Yeah, they look very similar. So dialer, when you look in I had it earlier, but the dialer health view will be split into two sections. The top section is dialer status, the bottom section is dialer history. So dialer history is a lot of what shows in dialer status, because dialer status is pretty much whatever's happened in the last 10 seconds or so, or what's currently happening.
Right.
So a lot of those will get dropped off and put into dialer history. So if you ever look in your dialer history and it says a system status message was removed from the status view, as you can see on this screenshot I have here, that's because in this dialer status view, you see how I have that recycle in progress for campaign? Well, that recycle isn't going to be in progress forever. So once the recycle is done, you'll find that, yeah, the system status was removed, shows on there. When you double click it, that dialog box in the lower left says that the following system status message was removed from the status view, is recycling its contact list, which is exactly what was in the status earlier. So even messages that appeared in your status, because I imagine some of you may have thought, well, wait a minute, how am I supposed to constantly keep an eye on this view for those status messages that drop off? If it's an important status message and it's dropped off, it'll go into call history, or sorry, dialer history, and then you can view it there. And you'll see others that we've run into, and a lot of these are extremely critical. Look into them immediately. A connection to the database could not be established. That's huge. The table could not be initialized or validated. That is usually a pretty big deal. About the only time it wouldn't be is if a campaign was running and it's a campaign you don't care about anymore. It was like a test campaign and somebody went into SQL and deleted it. I mean, it's not likely to have an impact on your dialer environment, but it's something you want to go in and clean up properly by stopping and deleting the campaign. And another one you see on there was dialer tran server has started successfully. If you see that in like the middle of the day, it may be a good idea to look and see if dialer tran restarted on its own for some reason. Usually you'd see some other message around there, like another one of these database errors or something like that. I would say the most common critical messages that we see are related to dialer tran, and they'll appear in this view. If any of you have ever run into the issue where dialer will all of a sudden say, the campaign has been paused because it's hit its error threshold, I would say, in my experience, 9 times out of 10, that's because dialer tran has hit some kind of database issue. Generally, it's something like a timeout where, for some reason, we can't reach SQL anymore, so we're getting timeouts back, so we pause. Or a table has suddenly gone missing. And in almost every instance, it's a problem on the SQL side that we need to address, but occasionally it has been a problem on our side where a filter isn't properly configured and it's causing an error when we try to run the SQL query or something like that, and then it's on our side. I'd say it's about 70-30. 70% of the time it's SQL, 30% of the time it's either a software issue or a configuration issue on our end. And I think that about does it, and that puts us at 2:45, which should give us about 15 minutes to manage questions. So I am going to, and I apologize if I can't immediately answer any of these. Like I say, some of these views are fairly new, and we haven't had as much time to deal with them as I would like. but I will get you those answers even if we can't address them now. Earlier, Chris Owens asked if you can break it down by campaign, and I apologize, Chris. I kind of remember when you asked that, but I can't remember what view that was. If you want to add to the question what view, I think it was somewhere around, I think it was one of the agent views. It might have been agent success results. Yeah, because 206 would have been pretty early on. If it was agent success results, then you probably already got your answer because I think there's an agent or a campaign success. Yeah, campaign success results where you can break down the success by campaign. If that wasn't what you wanted, let me know and just add a new question in there and I'll get to you. How would that be filtered by agent by campaign? Since our grid photo of the dialer finish code summary by agent has vanished, we've not been able to successfully gather the information that we used to have in the report. And I think that may have been yeah, if you have questions, be sure you try to tell me what view it was on, because unfortunately I was kind of going through some of these and I may have missed it. Let's see, and that would have been dialer finish code summary by agent. So I think campaign disposition summary. So this one is by campaign already. If you look up at the top left, it says campaign dialer reporting. Yeah, so in the top left it's campaign or dialer reporting. When you set up this report, when you go to run it, you can define if you want it by just one campaign, or you can add multiple campaigns and have them show on separate pages. But yes, in the example of this view, you can separate it by campaign. I don't believe you can separate it by agent, unless I'm just forgetting one of, oh yeah, agent disposition summary. So yeah, you can separate it by agent. And on this view, you can also separate it by campaign, because again, if you look in the top left, you'll see the date time that we configured to run the report for. You'll also see campaign dialer reporting. I hope that answers your question. If not, let me know if there's anything you want more. Yeah, which was there's agent disposition summary, and yeah, we already went over the campaign disposition summary. So that should do it. Is this meeting going to be available? Yes. We addressed that one a little earlier. But that also track inbound calls if they are in a blended environment. That's the one that I probably have to look into because I know that we do track inbound blended environment calls, but they get marked as non-dialer calls in the call history view, and those should show up in the went the wrong direction. In this view here, the call history, you should see non-dialer calls in here. But as for if those would appear in something like the disposition summary, if you did add a wrap-up code to them, I can't say for sure. That was in regards to the utilization report. Sorry, let me get over there. Now, you mean agent utilization? Yeah. So yes, this will show inbound calls as part of a blended environment, as we have there, where there's an inbound calls section, and then there's also for manual dial calls. Those actually also show up there. So yes, the details for inbound calls will be available. When will this make it into 4.0? I believe that was in relation to the zone view earlier, and again, that was SU3, which is available now. And SU3 has been doing very well for us so far. Just to make sure, if you decide to go to SU3, if you'd like, call into this dialer support team. We can go over any ESs we think are important, because there are a few that I think are good for SU3. Or if you wanted to wait, I believe 2015 R1 is on the way pretty soon as well, which will have all these views, and I don't believe they've added any more, but I can't say for sure. Sorry, I'm just reading over the views, so if it gets quiet here, or the questions. Assign the stats to a team or site level. you should be able to see the views on a site level because there's a site ID filter. So if you have separate sites configured for your agents, yes. But as for the specific managers within the same campaign, no, I am not aware of that being an option right now. Is it possible to create custom categories to show in Dialer real-time view? If you mean disposition categories, yes. Custom disposition categories will show in the Dialer real-time view. If you've tried to do that recently and you don't see them, I believe that there was a bug found in one of the views where either custom codes or custom categories weren't appearing. And we do have that on track to get corrected, so I apologize if you run into that. But yeah, that is something that is intended functionality. If it's not working for you, I assure you we are getting a fix made, and I believe that one is being ES'd because it is pretty big for a lot of our customers. Should 4.0 SU4 already have the penetration view and zone view? No. IC 4.0 SUs contain the historical views, like what we're looking at right here. The live views, so zone overview, stage overview, etc., those appear with Dialer SUs. So Dialer SU3 will have the zone view. Do not confuse that with IC SU3, which is comparatively pretty old and would not have those views or have anything really to do with those views. That would have some historical views SU2, IC SU2 wouldn't have, but it doesn't have anything to do with our live views. Is there a report that provides the completes per hour over the life of a file? I'm guessing that, so I'm guessing you're saying either successes probably per hour over the life of maybe a call list. We'd have to do a little bit more looking into that one. I can't say for certain on that. I am almost positive it would just be one of these, possibly the penetration or the campaign success results. Because again, if you look in the upper left, I've set my date time range from just 9/1 to 9/30. But as long as you knew the length of time that campaign or file, as you put it, whether that's call list or whatever, as long as you know the length of time that was live, you should be able to see the number of dials made, our contacts, and our successes. Bear with me for just one moment because the questions box is filling up pretty quick, and I want to get rid of some of them that I have addressed while leaving some of them that I know we didn't get to yet. So just give me one quick second. Okay, I think that does it. I can get rid of that. The address for the PowerPoint will be available next week. If I remember correctly, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. I am pretty sure it should be my.nn.com, and then, of course, I'm going to be wrong. What was on here? Oh, my apologies. So it is my.nn.com, but I said it earlier, it was under product information. It's going to actually be under self-help. You'll see a webinars link in kind of the lower right-hand corner. You should be able to select that and see our webinar as well as other webinars that have happened recently. So actually our webinar is already up there in terms of being able to register for it in the outline. You just need to keep an eye on that for when it goes from saying register to post it here. And we should have that for you in the near future. Actually, instead of just telling you where to go, let me select this and paste that in, and I'm going to send that to all. So thank you for your question on that. That was in regards to Workstation. Split disposition reports. Do you mean the agent if you meant the agent disposition summary and the campaign disposition summary, I want to say that those were SU6, but if you bear with me one more moment here, I should be able to tell you, looking at our Confluence page. SU6 was, no, that was called answer distribution. Agent disposition summary was in SU5. Campaign disposition summary was in SU4. So I hope that answers your question on that. If I missed anything, let me know. That was to Owen, where he said, what SU are these split disposition reports in? Again, that was SU4 for the campaign disposition and SU5 for the agent disposition summary. Sorry, yes, thank you, Owen. I see SU4 and I see SU5. I apologize for that. Let's see. Is there a report that can provide the completes per hour over the life of a file? Example at 10% expert at 9% penetration per hour. And this may just be one of those instances where you may do best to call in and talk to one of us, because it may be one of those things that we just need to work through it. But trying to think, I had an example of this. I have another screenshot, but I think it would take me too long to get to it, and we're running short on time. But let's say you had like 10 uploads on here. You would be able to select one or more of them, and then at the bottom here, see the penetration rate based on a start date. So you could say the start date was, let's say it was September 1st, and I run the same call list for 30 days, so to the end of September. I could say the start date is here, frequency is daily, and what the calculation mode is. So call this penetration. Then down in this penetration rate here, it would show you day by day how much of the contact list we were able to get through. So 94% on day 1, 80% day 2, etc. And then you'd be able to see it on a per day basis. So I think it's going to do what you're asking, and I apologize very much if I'm missing it. And if I am, feel free to call in and we can see if we can get you some more details on that, because I think that's the kind of thing that we might do best just talking about it. Time zone overview is available for SU3. Can you find it in SU6? Again, that's the difference between IC and dialer SUs. It's been very confusing up to this point. Thankfully, 2015 R1 is going to solve that long-standing issue because dialer and IC will be on the same build. So when IC is 2015 R1, dialer will be 2015 R1. But time zone overview is in dialer SU3. If you have IC SU6, then no, or if you have IC SU6 but dialer SU2, which ideally you wouldn't, because IC SU6 should be run with dialer SU3, but if you did, you would not have that view. But if you have dialer SU3 and IC SU6, Jamie, then yes, you will see the time zone overview. And to be clear, if you had IC SU5 and dialer SU3, you would see the time zone overview. It's dialer SU3 is the key component. Do calls placed? Calls placed using the TCPA module show up as a manual dial in the agent utilization report. That I'm not sure of. If it's not a call placed either by scripter using or through dialer from a power or predictive or preview campaign, or if it's not using ICE Live to simulate scripter, I'm guessing it would show up as a manual call. Is there a way to restrict agents from being able to log into multiple campaigns? Yes, there's kind of a few ways you can do that. One of the ways would be to make it so that agents do not have the ability to select what campaign they log into. But at that point, they log into any campaign that belongs to the same work group. If I recall correctly, you can also remove an agent's right to view a campaign, and then I don't believe they'll be logged into that campaign. There's a few different ways of doing it. The most ideal way kind of depends on your environment, and that may be another one where your best bet is to actually talk to somebody in support, or if Eric has any more on that.
I think I've covered about.
Yeah, that's always been one of those tricky ones because there's no flat answer for everybody. It really depends on what you want your agents to be able to do or not do. And it's another one that, yeah, give us a call if you'd like at the support line. We'll do our best to answer that question. Is a view available live to monitor the actual time that an agent is active on the dialer to monitor time on system? I do not believe so. You can see them in their stage and all that, but
on a per campaign basis.
Yeah, and it's all on a per campaign basis. So if they jumped around campaigns, there is no overarching view that lets you view all campaigns. So if an agent was in one campaign for 20 minutes and then they jump to another one for 20 minutes, you just see their 20 minutes in that campaign. So yeah, unfortunately, historical views in that instance would be your best bet. But if you feel that any of this is missing and it's very important to you, be sure to look into ideas.inin.com. Post your idea, have others around you upvote it, because we work on kind of the highest priority cases in ideas.in.com. Those become the cases that development works on next for new features. So get them upvoted, send them around to others, even other organizations that use Dialer that you think would benefit. Ideas.inn.com. Is a live report option available to monitor the average wrap of percent non-talk time per agent, as well as a split of the success stats per agent in live reporting? In a live view, I don't believe so, because it's hard for us to say how long an agent is doing any one thing until that statistic has been written to the database. Because it comes down to just a technical issue of there's only so many stats and so often that we can check them before we start just overloading stat subsystems. And I know that's not an ideal answer, but basically wrap-up time, either we only update wrap-up time once every 10 seconds, or if it was updated live, then it would just about bring pretty much any subsystem to its knees, because if you have dozens or hundreds of agents spread across multiple systems, I mean, you would just be sending millions of stat updates per second to multiple subsystems, and it's not even a product thing. I mean, just the kind of load that would put on a network or anything else is just huge. We've seen it before, and hopefully it's something that maybe down the line they'll find a way to improve that, but for the time being, it's just not feasible to have those kind of live stats constantly updating. If you have any other questions or anything, feel free to call into support and ask them. I will do my best to get those questions posted later for this webinar. And if you have anything further, just let us know, and we appreciate all of your time. Hopefully this was informative. Thank you, and have a good day.